For some reason, you all really liked my Boneworks lore and story explanation, and considering Bonelabs didn't do any better at explaining the story, here we are with this two-part video explaining the entire lore and story in Bonelab. Where are we? Some sort of black abyss with a magic mirror, a random pedestal, and some dice. In Bonelab, you're playing as yourself, literally your consciousness, and we start the game in the Voidway. If you don't know what the Voidway is, you'll want to go watch my Boneworks explainer just to make sure you're familiar with some basic concepts like the Void. But just as a reminder, the Voidway is a dimension that exists outside of space and time, and void energy is used to make virtual worlds. So in Bonelab, you start with your consciousness in the void, represented by this polyblink avatar. We might as well see what this dice does, and oh, would you look at that? It gives you a random peasant avatar. Suddenly a noose appears, and with no other choice, we put the noose around our neck, and whoa, what's happening? Where are we? We're suddenly transported to a simulation called Fantasyland, specifically in a town called Heaven's Reach, and we are now embodying a villager who seems to have summoned our consciousness here. At least that's according to a message now deleted from Alex, the Stress Level 0 creative director. The people pull the lever to execute us, and as we sit there either holding ourselves up or hanging helplessly, a flash of lightning makes a knife appear with a radio announcer voice.
Look folks, this stainless steel signature edition blade will cut through anything, but it's not going to stick around long at the nice price of $19.99, so call in right now and get cutting.
I wonder whose voice that is. I'm sure we'll learn more about them later, but for now, let's save ourselves from dying. With the knife, we cut ourselves loose and fall to the bottom of the pit below. Looking around, there's tons of bones, indicating that we aren't the first person Heaven's Reach has executed. Moving through the cave, we find a monolith with the precepts of harmony of Heaven's Reach. We and all of the people who were executed before us must have broken one of these rules. Maybe it was pay no heed below the belt, if you know what I mean. While it's not clear what rule was broken by the villager we now embody, it would make sense that they broke the last rule by summoning us. That is, rejection of modification to body, mind, and environment. They modified their mind by summoning us to embody them. As we move through the cave, you'll notice that it's starting to look more and more industrial with pipes peeking through. We aren't entirely in Fantasyland anymore. In fact, we are apparently connected to MythOS City. MythOS is basically a virtual metaverse and operating system created by Monogon Industries. In Boneworks, MythOS and Fantasyland were still in construction and were almost ready for release. And in Bonelab, both of them have already been released to the public, it seems. This is based on the poster of a magazine reviewing Fantasyland dated the year 97, the same year that MythOS was supposed to release according to the museum in Boneworks. So here we are, and as we look for a way out of the catacombs, we come across a lot of clipboard messages, also known as Mana chats, left behind by various people. The first clipboard we encounter is from the Heaven's Reach Grand Elder saying that the people of Heaven's Reach have decided to seal up these tombs. For too long have they allowed the subterranean demons to toy with them. This seems to be a reference to the Fantasyland cast members who are workers from MythOS that apparently come to study the Fantasyland simulation. But the people of Fantasyland have started to become suspicious of the cast members and start to see them in a negative light. So they've cut off these catacombs, allowing the people of Fantasyland to go fully self-sustaining. As a result of this, the cast members suggest abandoning their research and sealing off any back paths to myth. This explains why later on we'll see lots of quarantine doors blocking the way. As we move through the catacombs, we come across living skeletons. The Heaven's Reach elders refer to these skeletons as the horrors of keeping souls alive while the flesh decays. In other words, necromancy. But a note from the cast members suggests that the skeletons are simply sentient decorations, or in other words, plain old decorations to help with the fantasy aesthetic, but happen to also be made of artificial intelligence. That same note expresses ethical concerns of having torture weapons here with the AI. Of course, it's just for the fantasy aesthetic, and of course they aren't abusing the artificial entities in any way, but it still feels wrong. The cast member speculates, is MythOS running a Stanford prison experiment on the people of Heaven's Reach? The Stanford prison experiment was a real-life 2-week psychological experiment from the 70s that put a bunch of participants in a prison simulation where volunteers were randomly selected to be guards or prisoners. The study was to see how the participants reacted to environmental variables. For example, dressing up the prisoners in dehumanizing outfits, and then also giving the guards uniforms and batons to assert their authority. What ended up happening is that the participants assigned to be guards ended up becoming more and more brutal in their treatment of the prisoners, causing such extreme psychological abuse that the experiment ended after just 6 days. It is critiqued as the most unethical psychological experiment in history, and here a cast member is questioning if they're being put through something similar. Moving through the catacombs, we see a sign that says, "Ye be warned, lava." While the sign is warning us literally of some lava ahead, lava itself seems to be important or even symbolic. In fact, in the very next room, we find several clipboards that show the origin of of the infamous Lava Gang. Lava Gang first made an appearance in an update to Boneworks on a clipboard. They're essentially hackers and modders that reside in the Void. They use their unparalleled understanding of the Void to wreak havoc on many realities like they did in Boneworks. The clipboards we find here tell us a little bit more about the Lava Gang and how it started. Apparently, the Lava Gang started as cleaners from Fantasyland who wanted to smuggle out Fantasyland data to test and create things outside of the control of MythOS. They get their name from lava because they want to cleanse everything with lava and rebuild from scratch. They just want to create. And honestly, that sounds really nice. We've been cast out from Fantasyland, presumably for modifying our mind, so I wonder if we could join the Lava Gang somehow. For now, it appears we've abruptly left the fantasy aesthetic behind for the more drab, gray hallways of MythOS that we are familiar with thanks to Boneworks. Along the way, we keep hearing from this guy on the radio. I wonder what his deal is.
Pal here was causing a lot of trouble over in Fantasyland. Good thing I showed up, right? It may look peaceful out here, but it isn't. There's something hostile out there. Some people think we need an army, but I don't like armies. I want something different. Everything out here is about building, about creation.
This guy on the radio must be from the Lava Gang, and he's looking for a group of creators to fight off some danger. Maybe if we keep searching, we can find him and join him. Moving on, trying to escape the catacombs and offices, we find a clipboard that tells us a way to finally escape the simulation that we're stuck in. Apparently, a cast member had their transit pass destroyed, and so the only way for them to leave this simulation was to go through the offices to the exit simulation elevator. So that's where we're gonna go. Along the way, we come across familiar enemies from Boneworks. The crablet headset trying to force themselves onto us to immerse us even more into this virtual world, and the null bodies, the non-sentient workers building MythOS. Fighting through these enemies, we get to the transit area, to medieval management, then to the Fantasyland Wishing Well lift, where we learn a little bit more about the relationship between Myth and Fantasyland. As it turns out, there are lift crew members who are tasked with providing Fantasyland with whatever they wish for through the Wishing Well. They just have to make sure that whatever they send up was historically accurate. They would also send up some null body AI dressed as fantasy peasants to join the villagers and presumably eventually become a villager, but the lift crew laments that the people of Heaven's Reach are actually stupid. They never ask for anything interesting or fun. Not once have they wished for alcohol or stuff to brew their own alcohol, and the crew used to bet on what sport, if any, they'd come up with. But they're so dumb they spend too much of their time struggling to just survive, despite living in an environment perfectly crafted for survival. They always just ask for basic supplies. Eventually though, the elders of Heaven Reach decided that anything obtained through the Wishing Well was akin to witchcraft and thus forbidden to be used. This leaves the lift crew indignant. After all they've done for Fantasyland, after all the resources they've provided, the elders decide that the lift crew are demons. The crew supervisor speculates that Heaven's Reach has had too much peace, and so he wants to run a little experiment. Remember the Stanford prison experiment comparison from earlier? Similarly to the Stanford prison experiment, the lift crew decided to introduce violence to Fantasyland by giving the townspeople weapons that are similar to their common tools. Instead of sending a tree axe, send an axe with a 20% variance in design to inspire brutality. And in this manner, they get all of their torture tools and weapons. And as a result of this experiment, new laws and ideologies begin to form, and of course, violence breaks out. That's why the current people of Fantasyland are so quick to execute free thinkers who break their tenets. They've become violent and brutal. Moving on past the Wishing Well lift, we find ourselves in a shipping area full of Omni projectors who are a Monogon security force attacking the sentient null bodies. The area also has a lot of guns and ammo, and a clipboard reveals that the system has been shipping an excess of weaponry to the area, which is really weird considering this sector is tagged as fantasy, medieval, gothic, etc. But anyways, moving past the shipping area, bringing some of the guns with us, we finally find the elevator that will take us out of this simulation, and if you press the exit simulation button, you'll hear an announcer voice saying,
"Now exiting MythOS simulation. We hope you have a productive day."
You're on your own from here on out, pal. You're not allowed any closer. It's a long story. But hey, welcome home. Everything's possible for Lava Gang.
Having survived the elevator drop, we find ourselves in the Bonelab Hub, a lab with 6 different types of game modes to explore, along with 2 sealed off doors. It's not immediately clear what the Bonelab Hub is. We see lots of random projects, but who made all of these projects? All we know for sure is that it's a hidden underground research facility in MythOS. The map calls it a Monogon virtual physics laboratory, and there's 2 doors, a quarantine blast door with a stress level 0 logo above it, and a sealed off door with a Boneworks crate inside. To unlock these doors, we are told to enter and resolve modules. Each module has a key core, and once you resolve each module, the key core is unlocked, allowing us to use the crane to put them into their keyholes essentially, thus unlocking these doors. We find ourselves in a control room with a friendly radio voice.
One thing I am stuck on is what happened to the original Fantasyland devs? Everything's normal, then suddenly they flush everything they were working on. And this wasn't Fantasyland 2, it was something else. The next day, they're gone. Vanished. Where'd they go? Did they get fired? Did they go crazy? It doesn't seem likely. Monaghan found their offices totally deserted, and they've been trying to track down all that software they flushed ever since. I'm looking for them too, but not for the same reason. I want to believe they're out here somewhere still, building in the limitless everything. I'm still looking.
Moving into the next area, we find the stress level 0 offices that he was talking about, sitting in a giant pool. Investigating around, we can confirm what our radio friend said. Originally, they had offices in District 6 of MythOS. Those are the offices we explore in Boneworks. But after the Boneworks incident, security got too tight. They were working on something under the radar, and so they had to move so that Monogon wouldn't find out what they were doing. They chunked their office and moved to the Bone Lab, aka the Special Project Area, because this is the one safe space that Monogon is hands off. So apparently all of those modules in the Bone Lab were created by Stress Level 0 developers, and apparently they use something called the body log to blend into their test environments. No idea what exactly that is, but I'm sure we'll learn more about it later on. So the devs moved their offices here, and then as our radio friend said, they left again. They flushed everything they were working on here. A clipboard tells us that they knew bringing the office to Lab Spa was only temporary. Mono Security has caught on and will start digging into their work. They say we have to find a way to get the incomplete systems out for continued development. They can't be allowed to confiscate it. Smash and flush everything immediately. No more public comms. Execute plan A3. Looking around, we find a hole that says warning, do not open it. So you know what? Let's open it anyways. We drop down to the pool's floor, which is covered with void leaks. And there's a plug which says void plug, being used to plug up garbage apparently. This must be where the devs flushed everything to. So maybe if we go looking for them, we can help our friend on the radio. Using a crane we found in the office, we pull open the plug and drop down. We find ourselves in an area covered in trash, and based on the plug covering the entrance, this seems to be an area where void waste is stored. We see lots of the stuff the devs threw away in the form of broken information boards that were meant to be displayed in the Museum of Technical Demonstration. In fact, if you look closely, all of the boards are marked as approved for museum submission by none other than Boneworks Security Director Ford. One information board that's interesting describes the process of asset streaming from the void. It describes a way to load assets in and out of the void without void leaks by packaging assets through crates. So anyways, we fight through some more enemies and we eventually find a way out through a doorway leading to a tower. Loading into the next level, the way behind us is now shut with a door that you should recognize from Boneworks and Duck Season. The door has a baseball handle from Duck Season and looks just like the door Arthur Ford opens that eventually leads him into Fantasyland. So we find ourselves past this door at a mine, specifically Skoglund Gulch Mining Co. All around here we see various references to Saber Lake, the security company that Monogon used to track down Ford during the Boneworks incident. This poster clarifies that Saber Lake's goals are to look for anomalies and evidence of cryptids. So here we are about to get on the ride. But what kind of ride is this? Where are we anyways? The posters in the ride's line says that these are void mines. Another poster says that this mine is a gift from Old Myth. Old Myth was a predecessor to MythOS, and it was used for edutainment and was extremely popular. Another poster hints that we will actually be entering the void. What will we find, it says. And it also tells us to follow Ford and the boys, obviously a reference to Arthur Ford, who has already entered the void. Maybe this ride will take us to the void where we'll be able to join the lava gang with our radio friend. So we go ahead, we get on the ride, and we ride through this thrilling roller coaster, which happens to be full of lava. And at one point we see an on-air sign, which seems really weird to have here. And then at the end we see a big sign that says 98.6 FM WCCK. We've seen this symbol before. In In fact, you may remember from my Boneworks explainer that Duck Season has 3 doors, also called gates, with 3 different titles: Boneworks, Dead FM, and Machine King. These were once thought to refer to Stress Level Zero's next 3 titles after Duck Season, but I theorize that they actually refer to 3 important plot elements in each game. Boneworks refers to the Boneworks engine, not the game itself. And just now we saw the exact radio station written on Gate 2, 98.6 WCCK Dead FM. Could this be the radio station that our friend has been using to communicate with us? So anyways, back on the ride, some rocks start falling and a face appears, and suddenly we start floating and are pulled into the face's mouth into the void. That's it for part 1, and I'll be working as fast as I can to get out part 2. I originally only wanted to release 1 video, but even after cutting it down as much as I could, it was still going to be over 30 minutes. So part 2 will be linked in the description and in the pinned comment for you to check out. Thanks for watching.